If you love incorporating watercolor art onto your cards, or if you're a beginner watercolor and you want to add a beautiful item to your stash to inspire you to do more, this video is for you. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel, and Altenew has a brand new watercolor palette. It's called the Petal Palette. It's absolutely beautiful, looks gorgeous on your desk, and has the most smooth ceramic that will allow you to put down some watercolors, to mix colors, and to just have a lot of fun trying out new watercolor techniques on your cards. So let's dive right in. Let's take a look at the Petal Palette. Let's also use some paints on it and try it out. And then don't forget that there is an Instagram hop with prizes going on. So I will link to my Instagram post down in the YouTube description box below the video so you can enter to win there. But for now, let's check out the brand new Altenew Petal Palette. As usual, the packaging from Altenew is stunning, this box, and the photograph on the front is just amazing, but wait until you see the actual petal palette. It's about 8 by 9 inches, and there are 12 wells. Those are the little dips that you can put your watercolor in and use to mix or to just water down and to put onto your card or other project. So here it is. Here's that petal palette. I love it. It's the shape, the gold trim, just the shine. It's so easy to clean, which I'll show you in a little bit. But first, let's put down some Altenew watercolors. You can see I am using the tiniest little dot here. That's because I'm just going to be doing some swatching with these watercolors. So when I would normally start a project, I would just put down the colors that I need. But because I want to swatch these colors out so that I know what I have, I want to put down every color that's included in the set. Now I'm using an Altenew water brush. You can use any watercolor brush, water brush that you have, but I am using this water brush so that I can add water to the well and then swipe on that watercolor paint into a square. And you can see that I'm using more water as I go down that square, so the top will be the darkest and most opaque. And then as we go down, you'll see that beautiful watercolor effect where it's a little more translucent. These colors are stunning. They are nice and bright and right up my alley. So I'm super excited about this set, and I will link to it down in the YouTube description box below the video, along with the new Petal Palette. So here are all the colors from this watercolor set, and I just want to share with you how easy it is to clean off the Petal Palette. Yes, you could just rinse it in the sink, but if you don't have a sink nearby, you can use a wet wipe or a wet paper towel or a wet rag and just wipe off the paint, and it is as good as new. You can also use the Petal Palette with gouache, and so I am once again going to put down a tiny little dot of each of the colors of gouache from this Altenew gouache set. Now gouache is a little bit different than watercolors. It's very different, but I don't know all the ins and outs and what have you about the difference between the paints, but my daughter, who's much more of an artist and knows a lot about painting and things like that, says that you can get gouache to thin out and look like watercolor, but you can't get watercolor to look like gouache. And so what she means by that is you see in the upper left, the watercolor square that is red. Even at the very top where I had it the darkest, there's a hint of translucence to it. That's because it's a watercolor. With the gouache, you can see that most of these squares are fully opaque, and that's because it's gouache. Now, if you add much more color to the gouache, you can absolutely get it to look like a more translucent, like a watercolor, but you can't do the opposite. So there you go. That's a little difference between gouache and watercolor. And again, the Petal Palette cleans off beautifully. I have this set from Altenew that is a book or a pad full of flowers that are printed in black and then also in a light gray so that you could do a no line coloring. I'm using the black print, so this will look like a stamped image, and it's on watercolor paper, so the watercolor will move around beautifully. And the first stem that I tried there, I tried a wet on wet. So I actually wet the watercolor paper with some water and then added the watercolor to that effect. And that's how you get just different looks depending on what you're looking for. And then for a darker color, I'm starting with a dry brush or a dry paper and then adding the wet brush to it. So you can do both. Here we go with the dry paper, and really depending on how much water you add to it, you can get different looks on both of those techniques. So here I am going over that to add a little bit more color. Now let's speed this up because, this is kind of like watching paint dry for you, I'm sure. So I am not doing anything fancy. Like I mentioned, I am not a watercolor artist at all, not even in the slightest. I don't know a lot about it, but I like to try it out. And when you have something like the petal palette to work with, it makes it fun and easy to try out these techniques because you can add teeny tiny little bits of paint. You can add more or less as you're going. For the flowers, I'm starting with the darkest area in the center, and you can see that I'm pulling the color out but not reaching the very ends of the flower's petals. Now this is a technique that I like to use with alcohol markers, and you can use similar techniques with paints as well. So I'll start with that darker area and then keep the outer petal completely clear of paint. And then I'll go back over and then pull it all the way out to the end. And that will keep the ends of the petals or the tips of the petals very much lighter than the centers of the flowers. You can also see that I'm leaving some of the texture of the paint swipes, and that is a great way to add little hints of shading, and it also makes those petals look a little bit more dimensional. So there are things that you can do that you probably have already tried in other mediums, and just try them along with a new medium like watercolor. And again, I have just the colors that I'm using out on my palette. The great thing about having the palette is that you can go back to those colors and add in more if you want to. So there's my flowers. I could use that on a card, or I could just keep it on my desk. I'm also using some of the white watercolor. Now, I haven't really worked with white watercolor before, but it's not really supposed to be for shading. It's supposed to be for adding little highlights and things to your painting. So you're not going to mix it with, say, a red to make a pink. You're going to water down your colors, and those will get from less translucent to more translucent. The white is for adding in little bits of highlights. So I'm adding little dots like I would kind of with a white gel pen. Just adds a little something extra special to my painting. As I said, I am no watercolor artist, but I love to try new techniques, and the petal palette I find very inspiring to have colors on the palette, to be able to mix colors and try new techniques on my cards. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to head over to Instagram, check out my Instagram post, and enter the giveaway while it's still open. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. And post and enter to win the giveaway. Okay. Is still available while it's still open.